we have a game-changing archaeological discovery to share with you right from the shadows of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Mount in Jerusalem has never been excavated but an illegal construction project 20 years ago opened the door to some major discoveries. Ground-penetrating radar was used to scan beneath the Temple Mount, and what researchers uncovered was astonishing. For more than a century, this ground has remained untouched. No excavations, no drilling. Greater than, no detailed investigations, mainly because the political and religious consequences of disturbing it are too great for most governments to risk. The Temple Mount stands at the crossroads of three major world religions layered with over 2,000 years of conflict and history. Greater than. It's one of the most sensitive and fiercely protected places on Earth. For decades, whatever lay beneath its surface remained hidden and undisturbed. But then, greater than, scientists turned to ground-penetrating radar, directing it deep into the bedrock, searching for answers that had been buried for generations. The same technology once used to uncover hidden chambers inside the Great Pyramid of Giza was now focused here. And what came back from beneath the surface was completely unexpected. Shapes that shouldn't be there. Empty spaces no official records have ever mentioned. What the scans revealed didn't just raise questions, it triggered a chain of discoveries that authorities are still trying to keep under control. By the end of this, you'll understand why it caused such a serious uproar. But to really grasp why that radar scan matters, you need to go back to how close this entire story came to never being told. In 1999, bulldozers began tearing into the ground beneath one of the most disputed and sensitive places on Earth, changing everything that followed. The Islamic Waqf approved the construction of an underground mosque in an area known as Solomon's Stables. The Temple Mount, revered as Islam's third holiest site after Mecca and Medina, had already become an extremely sensitive political and religious flashpoint. What made the situation even more controversial was how it was carried out. No approval from Israeli authorities, no archaeological oversight, and no proper documentation. Within just 3 days, around 9,000 tons of soil were removed and dumped into the Kidron Valley like ordinary construction. Waste mixed with concrete, debris and tangled metal. Those tons of earth weren't just dirt. Workers cut through layers of history as if they were digging a routine construction site. Hundreds of truckloads holding traces of nearly 3,000 years of human activity were scattered without a single record, photograph, or catalogue. This was the kind of carefully layered ground that archaeologists spend entire careers studying, lost in a matter of days. And here's the part most people don't realize. This wasn't just any soil. This is the hill that the book of Genesis identifies as Mount Moriah, the place where God asked Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. It's also where King Solomon built the first temple, believed to have housed the Ark of the Covenant in a chamber so sacred that only one person could enter it, and only once a year. That temple was destroyed in 586 BCE by the Babylonians. A second temple was later built in its place, but it too met a violent end in 70 CE when Roman forces led by Titus, son of Vespasian, stormed Jerusalem with tens of thousands of soldiers and brought the already weakened city to its final collapse. For Muslims, this ground is known as the Noble Sanctuary, the place from which Muhammad is believed to have ascended to heaven. For Christians, it is remembered as the site where Jesus Christ overturned the tables of the money changers. Three major faiths all tied to one small hilltop. For Jews, it is their most sacred site. For Muslims, it is also deeply holy. Each side believes the entire site belongs to them. What holds the situation together is a fragile balance built on diplomacy, long-standing tradition, and the constant risk of conflict. For more than a century, that tension kept everything beneath the surface completely off limits. No excavations, no exploration, nothing. One of the most important archaeological sites in the world remained sealed and untouched. Then the bulldozers broke through it, and somewhere in that debris dumped into the Kidron Valley, priceless evidence was still lying there, but not for long. Because two individuals were about to attempt something most of the academic world had already dismissed as pointless. What they would recover from that soil had the potential to change everything. The rescue. When Gabriel Barkay heard what had happened beneath the Temple Mount, he immediately went to the Kidron Valley and stood at the edge of the dump site. He was in his 60s, and he had spent decades working in Jerusalem's soil. Over the years, he had uncovered discoveries most archaeologists only dream of, like tiny silver scrolls containing some of the oldest known biblical texts ever found. The kind of discovery that forces history books to be rewritten. He understood better than almost anyone alive just how valuable that discarded soil truly was, what layers of history were packed into every cubic meter of that soil. What names, what objects, what stories were woven through it like threads. And now it had all been reduced to landfill. Later it was described as watching a crime scene being destroyed in real time. Thousands of years of carefully layered history ripped from its context and scattered without any record. A story that could never be fully put back together. Standing beside him was Zaki de Vera, who felt the same thing, but not helplessness. What he felt was anger, the kind that sharpens into action. Together, they looked at that mountain of dumped soil and saw something no one else did. Not just a disaster, but a final opportunity. That's how the Temple Mount Sifting project began. It started in a public park in East Jerusalem with no major institutional support, no government funding, just determination, salvage soil, and a growing number of volunteers. People came from all over the world. Day after day, year after year, they worked under the heat, carefully sifting through the discarded earth by hand, bucket by bucket, fragment by fragment. And what they found was incredible. More than 500,000 artifacts emerged from that soil. Coins dating back to the reign of King Herod the Great, arrowheads from the Crusader period, Islamic jewelry, and pottery fragments from dozens of civilizations spanning over 3,000 years. It was like uncovering the entire condensed history of Jerusalem, hidden in what had been treated as simple construction waste. Then one day, a volunteer noticed something small. A hardened piece of clay, flattened and cracked with age. Easy to overlook, but under magnification it turned out to be something remarkable. A bulla, an ancient seal used to authenticate official documents. The inscription was written in Paleo-Hebrew and identified someone named Galiahu, son of Immer. The name Immer also appears in the book of Jeremiah, linked to a priestly family from the First Temple period. This tiny piece of clay, no bigger than a thumbnail, was powerful evidence. It pointed to a real person mentioned in scripture, not a legend, not symbolism, but someone who lived, worked and left his mark nearly 3,000 years ago on that very hill. And if these small clues are leading where researchers now think they are, what comes next makes everything so far seem like just the beginning. More bulli were discovered, names that matched biblical records, symbols like menorahs, temple gates and priestly garments. Each one felt like a direct message from the ancient world. But here's what made it even more intriguing. These artifacts weren't scattered randomly. They appeared in clusters, forming patterns that closely matched ancient descriptions of sacred areas on the mount. The pattern was too precise to ignore. The sifting project hadn't just uncovered artifacts, it had revealed a kind of map. And now, a new group of researchers had a way to follow that map deeper than any excavation ever could. The hidden network. Between 2021 and 2024, researchers began combining ground-penetrating radar data with old British survey maps from the Ottoman and Mandate periods. Those historical records had already hinted at something unusual beneath the surface. Reports had long mentioned strange underground voids near the southern edge of the Temple Mount, chambers, staircases, and hollow spaces that no one could fully explain. For generations, these accounts were tucked away in archives, often dismissed as speculation from a less scientific era. But a new team decided to take another look. Direct excavation beneath the mount was still off-limits, too sensitive politically and too explosive religiously. So instead, they turned to ground-penetrating radar, the same technology that once revealed hidden chambers inside the Great Pyramid of Giza, and let the data do the talking. What came back was impossible to ignore. The scans revealed straight lines, sharp angles, and geometric patterns, clear signs of human construction in places where only natural limestone should exist. There were indications of rooms, corridors, and sealed spaces that simply shouldn't be there. Here's where it gets even more compelling. When researchers overlaid the radar results onto century-old British survey maps, the shapes lined up almost perfectly. The same corridors, the same blocked staircases, the same empty spaces. After more than 100 years, modern technology had confirmed what earlier explorers had suspected but few had believed. The radar wasn't picking up noise. It was detecting something real, something hidden, something sealed. But there was one limitation. Radar can't see inside solid stone. Then, during work in the Western Wall tunnels near Western Wall, workers made an unexpected discovery. While clearing debris from a structure dating back to the time of King Herod the Great, they uncovered a partially buried staircase carved directly into the limestone. It led downward into complete darkness. At the bottom, they found a long-forgotten antechamber, one that had been dug out roughly without any proper archaeological care. The upper walls still showed traces of Byzantine Empire craftsmanship. Faint carvings, worn crosses, and inscriptions dating back to the 4th and 5th centuries. Early Christians had once gathered and worshipped in this space nearly 1,500 years ago. But what lay beneath the floor was far older. The foundation stones were made of massive ashlar blocks, precisely cut and fitted together with a level of skill rarely seen outside the First Temple period. This wasn't Crusader work, not Roman, not even from the time of Herod the Great. It was something much older. The craftsmanship pointed to techniques that largely disappeared after the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem. That realization forced the team to stop and rethink everything they thought they knew. Then they found something even more unsettling. A second staircase, partially collapsed and packed tightly with rubble. But this wasn't the result of time or natural decay. The stones had been deliberately placed wedged into position by human hands. Someone had sealed this passage on purpose, as if it was critically important that no one ever reached whatever lay below. The radar had already revealed an empty space beneath. Now the question was simple and dangerous. Would anyone actually go down there, the subterranean structure? Beneath those sealed passages, researchers uncovered something that completely changed their understanding of what might be hidden below. What they uncovered was far more complex than anyone expected: a vast network of underground cisterns, channels and aqueducts carved directly into the bedrock. It wasn't just large, it was interconnected and engineered with a level of sophistication that seemed far ahead of its time. When researchers tested mineral residue from the plaster lining, the carbon dating results were striking. This wasn't Roman, not Herodian. The timeline pointed back to the First Temple period, around the 8th to 9th century BCE. That places its construction right in the era of the ancient Israelite kings described in the Hebrew Bible, traditionally associated with the time of Solomon. But what truly amazed the experts wasn't just how old it was how advanced the design turned out to be. Narrow feeder tunnels guided rainwater into reservoirs using flow patterns that prevented stagnation. Overflow channels redirected excess water into secondary chambers, protecting the system from flooding while maintaining a steady supply. It even accounted for pressure differences, seasonal changes, and sudden intense downpours after long dry periods. This wasn't simple construction. It was large-scale, highly planned engineering, built by a society that clearly understood how vital water was both practically and spiritually. They didn't just manage water, they integrated it into the very structure of the landscape. And when researchers compared these findings with ancient texts, things began to line up. Several of these systems matched descriptions found in the books of Chronicles, which mentioned preparations made by Israelite kings to supply water for temple rituals. Suddenly, what seemed like isolated discoveries started forming a much bigger picture. One massive basin was found directly beneath the area where Hebrew texts placed the altar of sacrifice. It was lined with thick layers of ash and faint traces of organic residue, evidence that suggested repeated ritual activity over centuries. As one researcher explained, they had uncovered over 6,000 ancient coins, fragments of figurines and statues, and even objects linked to ancient warfare. But what stood out most was the pattern signs of continuous ritual use. Washing, cleansing offerings performed again and again in the same place across generations. But here's where things became even more intriguing. The channels didn't end at the cisterns. Radar scans had already shown that they continued deeper, leading toward chambers that had been sealed with incredible precision. These spaces had remained untouched through every empire, every earthquake, every invasion that had passed over this hill for nearly 3,000 years. And now the team was preparing to go inside. Leading them was Yuval Baruch, a researcher known for his calm, methodical approach. He wasn't someone who chased drama. He trusted evidence, moved carefully, and documented everything with precision. As he guided the team beyond the sealed staircase, he proceeded the only way he knew how, slowly, quietly, and one deliberate step at a time into the unknown. The passage grew tighter as they moved forward. The air felt heavy, ancient, untouched by human breath for thousands of years. It was the kind of stillness you simply don't find above ground anymore. The radar had already shown them the shape of the chamber ahead, the size of the space, and the outline of what might be inside. But seeing data on a screen is one thing. Standing there in complete darkness is something else entirely. At the end of the corridor, they reached a sealed stone threshold. Carefully, the final stones were removed. No one spoke. No one moved. Inside was a small chamber no more than 10 feet across. The walls were carved straight into the bedrock, smooth, bare, and untouched by decoration. No carvings, no color, just raw ancient stone. At the center stood a shallow, circular stone basin partially buried in ash. Around it were fragments of burned incense. Black clay oil lamps had been placed with deliberate precision. Small offerings lay arranged in a way that felt intentional, almost reverent. This wasn't a space that had collapsed or been forgotten. It had been sealed deliberately, as if it was meant to remain untouched forever, and for more than 2,000 years it had. Faint markings were visible on the basin, worn down by time, but still readable under direct light. The script was Paleo-Hebrew. Yuval Baruch leaned in closer. His headlamp caught the carved letters as he read them slowly once, then again, and then his voice broke. "He who dwells here, his spirit never leaves." Yuval Baruch stepped back. Someone behind him caught the sound of his breath, not quite a gasp, not quite a word, and in that moment the entire team understood before he could even explain. His hands weren't steady. This was a man known for precision, for control, for relying only on evidence. And yet here he stood inside a small chamber carved into solid rock, facing something he had never prepared for. This wasn't just the discovery of another artifact. It felt like something more like physical proof of a presence. Around them were objects, pieces of jewelry, seals and seal impressions. Fragments of clothing accessories, each one silent but deeply intentional. Then the realization settled in. Those words carved into the stone weren't poetic, and they weren't just decorative. They matched descriptions from ancient texts, descriptions tied to one place and one place only, the Holy of Holies, the innermost chamber of the temple. Believed to be the dwelling place of the Shekinah, the physical presence of God. According to tradition, it was so sacred that only the high priest could enter, and only once a year. It was said that if he entered unworthily, he would not survive. A rope would be tied to his ankle, so his body could be pulled out without anyone else having to step inside. For centuries, no physical trace of that space had ever been found. No artifacts, no confirmed location, nothing that could move it from belief into evidence. Scholars debated whether it was a real place or a symbolic idea passed down through generations until now. The moment his voice broke in, that chamber changed everything. And then the scientific confirmation followed. Carbon dating results came back. The oil lamps matched examples from the 8th to 7th century BCE, the exact time frame of the First Temple period. For the first time, the line between history, faith, and physical evidence began to blur in a way no one had ever seen before. Tests showed that the limestone matched materials associated with the era traditionally linked to Solomon. The wording of the inscription also aligned closely with religious texts from the First Temple period, some of which were only rediscovered in modern times through the Dead Sea Scrolls. This wasn't speculation anymore, it was physical, datable, and verifiable. Nearly 3,000 years ago, someone had carved those words into stone intentionally, so that the message would endure no matter how many empires rose and fell above it. Hidden in silence, sealed in darkness, it waited, and now it had finally been read, the revelation. The discovery sent shockwaves through the academic world, but not loudly, quietly, carefully. The information has been released in fragments cautiously and deliberately, because those who understand what was found also understand the risks. The Temple Mount is sacred to 3 major world religions. Any claim that seems to confirm one tradition over others has the potential to spark tensions far beyond Jerusalem. In many ways, this discovery is like a lit match in a room full of fuel, and everyone involved knows how dangerous it could become if handled carelessly. Theologian Michael L. Brown described it as one of the most significant archaeological confirmations of Scripture since the Dead Sea Scrolls, while also warning that its full meaning may take decades to fully understand. For some Christian communities, it's seen as a powerful affirmation, evidence that biblical accounts may be grounded in historical reality rather than stories shaped and passed down over time. But here's the reality. Not everyone is celebrating. David Lau reportedly acknowledged that the discovery aligns with what many believers have always held to be true. At the same time, he warned that disturbing an area connected to the Shekinah without proper spiritual preparation is considered a serious violation in traditional Jewish belief. For many devout Jews, this ground isn't just historically important, it is spiritually alive. Digging into it isn't seen as exploration, but as desecration. Islamic authorities, on the other hand, have mostly remained quiet. However, there are indications of deep concern about how such findings might be used, especially when it comes to political or territorial claims. The Temple Mount exists under a delicate balance maintained through decades of diplomacy and constant tension. That balance has always been fragile, but now it may be more unstable than ever. A single, clear public confirmation of these discoveries could be enough to disrupt agreements that have held this sensitive situation together for generations. And yet behind the scenes, the research is moving faster than ever. Scientists are now pushing for permission to use muon imaging, a particle scanning technology that helped reveal hidden voids inside the Great Pyramid of Giza in 2017. The idea is simple. Map what's underground without digging, without disturbing the surface, and without triggering political or religious backlash. Because the ground-penetrating radar has already shown something else. 3 more hidden voids. 3 sealed spaces, never opened, never mapped, never seen in modern times. And one of them stands out. It lies directly beneath the dome of the rock, stretching nearly 40 feet across. That makes it the largest unknown cavity beneath the entire Temple Mount, right beneath one of the most spiritually significant structures in the world. No one knows what's inside. No one knows who sealed it or when. And the truth is, the political and religious barriers surrounding this site are so complex that we may never see those questions answered in our lifetime. But take a moment to think about what the scans have already revealed. From a chamber barely 10 feet wide, researchers found a stone basin and inscription, and evidence that some belief points to the Holy of Holies as a real physical place, not just a story. All of that came from a space no bigger than a small room. Now imagine something much larger. A sealed void, nearly 4 times that size, located directly beneath the area where tradition says Solomon placed the Ark of the Covenant. A place where it's believed the divine presence rested between 2 golden cherubim, where, according to Jewish mystical tradition, the very foundation stone of creation connects the physical world to the spiritual one. And here's what makes it even more intriguing. Researchers believe those 3 voids detected by radar might not be the only ones. Ground-penetrating radar has limits. It can only reach so deep. But more advanced methods like muon imaging could go further, potentially revealing spaces hidden deep within solid rock, places radar simply can't access. Spaces that may have been sealed long before the Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem, before the exile, before everything changed. Some believe these chambers could have been deliberately sealed by priests who saw the invasion coming, choosing not to preserve the structure of the temple itself, but to protect what it represented. To hide something so important that it would only be found by a future civilization with tools they couldn't even imagine. What if that's what really happened? What if the largest sealed void beneath the dome of the rock holds the answer to a question that 3 religions have been asking for thousands of years? The radar has already outlined its edges. The mystery is no longer completely hidden. And once a door like this is even slightly opened, it may never truly be closed again. So now the question becomes yours. Should researchers continue and open these sealed chambers? Or are some secrets meant to remain buried forever?